I'm sure I'm not the only person to have observed over these past few months that the kind of international anthem for the year 2020 was written prophetically in the year 1969. It was written by two Shakespearean caliber poets, one named Mick Jagger and the other named Keith Richards. It was in 1969 that Mick Jagger and Keith Richards released their song with the very familiar and catchy refrain that I won't sing for you, but they don't really sing it in either. They just kind of shout it. And the refrain goes, "No, you can't always get what you want. You can't always get what you want. You can't always get what you want." That's really like the refrain for quite a bit of this past year so far, the 2020, it seems to me, with the onslaught of COVID in our lives. There really is not anybody, anywhere in the world who is really getting what we want entirely at this point here. All of us are facing frustrations. All of us are facing things that are less than what we wished and hoped they might be. All of us are facing, at times, a sense of loss. And so the key question for us when we can't always get what we want is, how do we choose to respond? How do we react? What choices do we make? What attitudes do we adopt in response to the reality that life doesn't always give us what we want? It's life is a lot like Daniel and Shannon's portrayal of Daniel as someone for whom lots of things just didn't go his way. Lots of things aren't going our way. And I think in the gospel reading this morning in Matthew chapter 11, Jesus portrays a group of people who aren't getting what they want and describes how it is that they respond to this reality that life is not unfolding according to their wishes, needs, wants, and demands. Jesus says in Matthew chapter 11, "But to what will I compare this generation? It is like children sitting in the marketplace and calling to one another. We played the flute for you, and you did not dance. We waited. We wailed, and you did not mourn. For John came neither eating nor drinking, and they say he has a demon. The Son of Man came eating and drinking, and they say, look, a glutton and a drunkard, a friend of tax collectors and sinners. Yet wisdom is vindicated by her deeds." So Jesus is portraying here an attitude to life that resists those things that aren't the way we'd hoped they might be, and pushes harder and harder to try to make life conform to our wishes, wants, needs, and demands. And the problem with that is that it leads us to the place that Jesus speaks about at the end of the passage that Mike and Bonnie read this morning, where he speaks of those who are weary and are carrying heavy burdens. The problem with demanding that life meets my expectations or fulfills my wants, needs, wishes, and desires. The problem with that is that it's very tiring. I get weary pushing and demanding and trying to force life to conform to my desires. I was given a book this past week, a lovely little book, and I'm supposed to be taking it away with me on my holiday to read. It's, I don't know if any of you know this book, Richard Wagame's book, Embers, the late First Nations Canadian poet and novelist, Richard Wagame's. It's a selection of very short little meditations that he writes in the mornings that he shared just 2 years before he died. And I'm supposed to be reading this on my holiday, but I keep sneaking peeks at it because it's quite hard to resist. It's such a lovely little volume. And in this, in one of the meditations, Wagame says, like most of us do, I spend a lot of time trying to compress things into a context I could accept. That was hard work. And it meant I was alone most of the time. Spent a lot of time trying to compress things into a context I could accept, trying to force life to conform to my wishes, needs, wants, and the reality is we're never going to be totally successful at doing that. And when we aren't, it's tempting to become weary and tired. But Jesus offers an alternative route. Jesus offers a different way of being in relationship to situations that are not as we want them to be. Jesus says, "Come to me, all you that are weary and are carrying heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy, and my burden is light." The alternative that Jesus offers is the alternative that Daniel took, of coming to the spirit of love and light, of goodness and truth that was embodied in the person of Jesus. Daniel came to God. Daniel brought to God all his concerns, the needs, wants, and desires of his life, and laid them at God's feet. Richard Wagame's says a little later in this little book that I'm not looking at until my holidays, he says, the single hardest lesson I've ever had to learn is that the greater, grander plan is not mine to create or know. If I am in ceremony and prayer for the right reason, I leave all that up to the Creator. Man, we should all have that tattooed on the inside of our eyelids. The single hardest lesson I've ever had to learn is that the greater, grander plan is not mine to create or know. If I am in ceremony, in worship and prayer for the right reasons, I leave all that up to the Creator. The reality is we don't know what's going on. We don't understand the times we live in. We don't understand often our own lives. We don't understand often the lives of people we love and care for, people who are part of our world. And when we don't understand, when we can't make sense, when we can't force life into conforming to our wishes, needs, wants, demands, and desires, when we don't always get what we want, then Jesus suggests that we come to him. And when we come to him, what we do is we take his yoke upon us. And to take the yoke of Jesus upon us is to surrender our will, because Jesus is the stronger ox, and we're linked, we're connected to that power of love and light that is Jesus' presence. And so we determine by taking that yoke, that we will go where the power of love, light, goodness, truth, and beauty is taking us. And where it's taking us is to a place where we can learn. Jesus says, take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart. See, all these things that we brace against, all these circumstances that we resist, all these situations that we are determined we have to change. The reality is they all have a lesson for us. They're all trying to teach us something. They're all trying to bring us to that place of rest, that place of trust, where we can trust that although we don't see the bigger picture, although we don't know what's going on, although we can't control our circumstances, there is a goodness at the heart of life that we can open to, and in which we can find peace. And so, one more little quote from Richard's book, Embers. He says, it's all, you got to know I love this, it's all about opening, really. When I open myself to the world and its possibilities, even its hurts, I become whole. When I choose to close, my life becomes fraught with struggle. Everything I do becomes about shielding myself rather than inviting good energy to fill me. That's why we do this strange little thing we're doing here, Zoom church, or even church in a building. It's why we ring bells. It's why we sing songs. It's why we open our hearts in prayer. We do all of that in order that we might invite the positive energy of love and light to fill our lives, and that we might open to that reality, even, Richard says, even when it hurts, maybe especially when it hurts, maybe especially when we don't always get what we want, maybe especially when things seem to go bump and grind and are difficult and painful. Even then, especially then, the opportunity to open and deepen is more profound and real. You know, Keith Richards and Mick Jagger did have some truth and wisdom in their words. They're right. You don't always get what you want. But then they have one more line. But if you try, they say, sometime you find you get what you need. If you open, we may in fact be getting just what we need. Just what we need to be refined. Just what we need to have some of those rough edges smoothed off in our lives. Just what we need, the perfect circumstances for every one of us to learn the glad and profound art of surrender, of letting go, of taking that yoke and allowing Jesus to be our guide and walking obediently beside and within and him within us as we go through these circumstances that are unsettling, that are painful, that do carry a sense of loss and suffering for all of us. Jesus is with us. We are not alone. And we can open our hearts to the deep presence of his love.